Welcome to another Sunday School preview, and we return to the book of Job. And this Sunday's lesson, the theme will be Job's pain-filled grief, and it will cover 3 sections. The first section will be Job curses the day of his birth. The second section will be Job regrets his existence, and the third section will finish on Job despairs in suffering. And this lesson is the type of lesson that I would recommend anyone who is a Christian and means to be a deep Christian to attend. So we come to the first section, Job curses the day of his birth. We find that Job, having lost everything, has some friends who have arrived on the scene to cheer him up or to comfort him. Job is really going through it. And as Job is going through his suffering, we find that it's almost the text or this lesson suggests that Job is almost at the brink of giving up. He cursed the very day he is born. And this lesson suggests that Job is just at the brink of even cursing God himself. He doesn't cross that line, but he goes very close to the line of wanting to challenge and to say, God, why am I experiencing this? Now, in the lesson we find that Job's friend, they start out on a right footing because at first they are silent for 7 days. That means all they have done is to just be present in the midst of his suffering. And one of the things that I would have gleaned from the lesson is that silence is often an important aspect in helping those who are depressed. Sometimes words will never help those who are in shock. And you'll find that in the lesson. Simply saying that in Jamaican terms, if you don't know what to say, sometimes you just don't need to say anything. That means as persons are going through their difficulty, unless we have been given a divine revelation, sometimes it's best we don't try to explain why the individual is going through what they are going through. Sometimes silence is best when we encounter persons who are going through their difficulties and their heartache. And as we go, we find that Job expresses his unbearable anger, but he doesn't cross the line of offending God. And it also, brothers and sisters, as we go into this text, we are going to find out that a question is asked in the closing section of the first section. And it says, what can cause a person today to reach such a state of despair? And how should the church respond? Now, I'm not going to seek to answer that question, but think about it as you go to Sunday school this Sunday. Think about all the things people can experience, which this lesson will briefly touch on. And how is it that we ought to respond when we see persons who claim to be Christians seemingly going through things that we don't believe Christians should go through? What should be our response? Now, as we go from that first section where Job is cursing a lot of things, minus God, we come to a new section where Job is now questioning. So he moves from cursing the day he was born to the point of questioning his very existence. When we go to the first section, we're going to find that in the first section will list out a type of roadmap for grief. That means when people are grieving, they tend to go from one stage to a next stage to another stage as they go through the process of grieving and recovery. And he moves from cursing to questioning his very existence, wondering why he was born, why didn't he die in the womb. And as we go, we're going to find out that questioning God in difficulty is not a sin. And I've often heard that in my years as a young believer and even in ministry, where a person will say, well, we should not question God. But when we go into this lesson, we're going to find out that questioning God is not an offense. This section is going to look at the fact that there are many times in the Bible we find righteous people, the psalmists and others, going through difficult seasons like Job, and they are brought to the point where they have to ask God, God, what's happening? Where are you? And therefore, when persons are bombarded by the difficulties of life, it is natural for them to question how is it that they are living a righteous life and yet they are experiencing such difficulty and pain. And finally, we go to the third section. Job despairs in suffering. We find out that he moves from cursing to questioning, and he sinks into what is obviously despair. We would call it depression. He is overwhelmed by the vast nature of what he is experiencing. And when we come to this section, we see that the thing that Job feared most has become a reality in his life. And what we will find out in this lesson is that at this stage, the lesson doesn't seek to explain the reason for Job's suffering. What the lesson seeks to establish is the reality of suffering, and that suffering is not a sign of one's spiritual condition. That loss and pain and grief is not necessarily the fact that God is angry, that God has abandoned his people. And while it is a difficult lesson, and we all pray that we will never have to experience such great loss, and while we pray that the people that we know will never suffer such great loss, even if persons don't go to the point of Job where he lost everything, his family, he lost his wealth, he lost his health, even if persons don't go to that degree, because we all have a different level of spiritual stamina. An individual doesn't have to lose everything to struggle with the reality of why, as a believer, they are going through what they are going through. And it is the onus of us as the people of God to remind the congregation. We're not speaking negative over the life of God's people, but we're dealing with the reality of the texts that have been given to us for us to study, to understand, and to know. So we go after Sunday school this Sunday morning to face a very challenging lesson, and to be open to seek to answer some of the hard questions that might be placed upon us. And remember, as Sunday school teachers and as students, that we may not have all the answers. We may never know the reason for all of the suffering. But one thing we're called to remember, that in the midst of everything that Job was going through, God was still there behind the scenes, watching over Job, putting limitations on the enemy. And remember that God has said in his word that he will never give us more than we can bear. So remember, Sunday school is still a key, and we're called to be a part of it. Invite someone out to Sunday school this Sunday, and let's see what we can gain from the life of this man called Job. God bless you.